Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Feeling older by the minute, for sure.
Don't we all?
Yeah, and exactly. Don't we all? It's exactly correct. Exactly correct.
Not us.
We're not
I
getting
learned
old.
from some advice from my father, which is I keep forgetting to change my screen name to be more than just now I'm officially a rabbi. See, it's that easy. You just change your name and then you become officially a rabbi in Zoom, which is great. Well, it's great to see all of you. It's great to be back together for Shabbat. It's great to be with Cantor Lauren. And at this point, I'm going to mute everybody. So again, forgive me for being rude in this way. And we're going to bring Cantor Lauren up and myself. Okay. So again, Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and certainly a lot of reasons to be celebratory coming into Shabbat, but also just I'm not sure how many of you have heard what happened in Israel as related to, unfortunately, what is normally a very sort of amazing kind of experience on Har Meron in the northern part of the country, in which a lot of people gather on Lag BaOmer at the gravesite of Shimon Bar Yochai, and it ends up being usually a very sort of beautiful, celebratory, unique kind of part of our Jewish year. And unfortunately, there was really a devastating tragedy that took place there. So, the Jewish people as a whole, I think tonight are coming into our service with a heavy heart in that way. And it's one of the times where I think it's hard to be far apart from Israel. It's hard to always be able to connect in the ways that we want to connect. But I think it's important for us to keep these global experiences of the Jewish people in our hearts, especially as we gather together in a community. And while we still don't know the true extent of the devastation, we can certainly we can pray tonight for those that have been affected, for the families, and ultimately for the state of Israel, which I think is really in mourning right now. So certainly we'll begin with a certain sense of heaviness, but as I always remind us, that when we come into Shabbat, there is really an expectation, even really an obligation, to enter Shabbat and to celebrate Shabbat with joy and with celebration. So even while we hold the heaviness in our heart, we're also going to celebrate as best as we can. So tonight we're going to light our Shabbat candles, and I believe Cantor Lauren is going to help us on page 120. So Cantor Lauren, thank you very much.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kinishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. So we're going to turn now to page 128. We'll give the cantor just a second to get her guitar ready, and we'll begin our service with Yedid Nefesh, again, page 128. Turn now to page 130 as we begin Kabbalat Shabbat together at the very top of the page.
Nekan
page 131.
Sing unto God all the earth a new song. I will sing unto God a new song. Sing unto God and we'll all sing along. All the earth a new song unto God. Shiru Adonai kol haaretz. Shiru Adonai shir chadash.
Now turn to page 132.
Or zaru ala tzadik, uleishelef simcha. Or zaru ala tzadik, uleishelef simcha. Simchu tzadikim Adonai, ve'odu lezecher kodsho. Simchu tzadikim Adonai, ve'odu lezecher kodsho.
Turn now to page 134.
Zamru l'Adonai bechinor v'kol zimera. Zamru l'Adonai bechinor v'kol zimera.
Turn now to page 135, the last paragraph in Hebrew, Romamu.
Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho.
Turn now to page 138, Lecha Dodi, and a reminder we'll do the first, second, fifth, and ninth paragraphs.
Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. כל אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשמו תפארת ותחילה. לך דודי לקראת עלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת עלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו במאחד, כי בכל הברכה בראש מקדם נסוכה. סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת עלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת עלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך ומאורי, אורי, אורי, שיר דברי. כבוד אדוני עלי בתחילה. לך דודי לקראת עלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת עלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה בצהלה. תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת עלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת עלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
Turn now to page 140.
מזמור השיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך העליון, ולזמר לשמך העליון. מזמור השיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך העליון, לזמר לשמך העליון. להגיד בבוקר חסדך, באמונתך בלילות. עלה אסון ועלה נבל, עלה היגיון וחילון. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך העליון, ולזמר לשמך העליון. צדיק אתה מרי פרח, כארץ בלבנון ישגה, שתולים בבית אדוני, בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו. עוד ינובו מסבה, דשנים ורעננים יהיו, להגיד כי ישר אדוני צורי, ולא עוולת עמו.
Turn now to the Chatzi Kaddish on page 144.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, פלמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בגלה בגלה ובזמן קריב, ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם עלמי עלמי וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם וינשא, ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל, שמי קודשו בריחו, לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמירה מעלמה, ויאמרו אמן.
So now to page 146 for the Baruch Hu.
Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Marechu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, Le'olam va'ed, Le'olam va'ed.
Let's join together on the top of page 149. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows.
הוא מעביר יום ומביא לילה, הוא מבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני, המעריב הרבים. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו למדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכנו וקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך, לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו מאורך ימינו, ובהם נגע יומם ולילה. מאהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
Please join with me on the top of page 154. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. Let's read together now on the top of page 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, and that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. As we turn to page 158. We'll turn now to the top of page 161. Turn now to page 162.
השמיים ואת הארץ.
In a moment, Cantor Lauren will help us to begin the Amidah on page 164, and then we'll continue silently. As always, we'll give a few moments for everyone to complete their prayers in whatever fashion or way feels most appropriate to you. So Cantor Lauren, if you'll get us started on page 164, that'd be great.
Adonai Sefatay Tiftach Ufi Havi Tfilatecha Adonai, open up my lips and my mouth may declare your praise.
thoughts and our hearts now turn to those in our lives, those in our community, and those around the world who are in need of healing. In a moment, I'll read our Misha Berach list, but I'll also invite you to add additional names if you feel comfortable, to share them in the chat, or simply to hold your loved ones in your hearts. In our community tonight, we're thinking of Mazal Bat Adel, Dolores Michka, Estelle Gass, Sylvia Orn, Irachmiel Ben Hinda, Paloma Chauhan, Samuel Moskowitz, Audrey Lubo, Chaim Leib, Robert Posner and Joyce Weinberg, Rick Gold, Stu Pollack, Jane London, Catherine Guarino, Emunah Chava, Raina Walsh, Deirdre Klein, Stephanie Skit, Judy Stern, Miriam Kornfeld, Roz Brody, Chanarut Bat Sarah, Marley Silverberg, Susan Spruce, Fagel Tzipora Bat Elisheva Bat Sarah, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Idle Basha Bat Yitzchak, Tzvi Menachem and Chaim, Rivka Bat Devora, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Neil Elliott and Eileen Rosen, Israel Ben Yitzchak, Ben Zion Ben Moshe, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kossoff, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klopman, Rivka Bat Rachel, Sarah Bat Chana, Moshe Eliezer Ben Sivia, Peretz Ben Yehuda, and Leah Bat Naomi. And of course, we add all the names that have been added in the chat and those that we're thinking of as we turn back to Cantor Lauren, who will lead us in the Misha Berach on page 371. Thank you, Cantor Lauren. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Just gonna get myself situated here. So I think some of you know this past week I turned 40. And if you didn't know that beforehand, I promise I'm not fishing for applause. It's just a fact of life. But as you can see here, miraculously in the last week, the white hairs have multiplied in the beard. And it's an indication that clearly time has passed and that things have changed. But of course, inevitably, as people reach this point in life, various milestones of life and all of those kinds of things, we inevitably take a certain amount of stock. We try to consider, what does it mean, right? What does it mean to reach these milestones? And I think, this is probably an existential kind of conversation that happens at any point in time. But during COVID, of course, it changes a lot of things, right? We've recalculated a lot of what it is that we think about as we think about life and as we age and what our priorities are and all those kinds of things. So, amongst the celebration this week, I've also really been thinking a lot about what it means to be getting older. And, I've never been one of those people who either shies away from it or celebrates it. It's, to me, is never really taken on that sort of greatest significance of the number attached to the years I've lived. But of course, I think as I've gotten older and now have children and family and all that I really have started to think about things in a slightly different way. And being maybe the fact that I am who I am, or the fact that I'm a rabbi, my first thought was to go back to our tradition and see if there was some wisdom imparted. And sure enough, I'm off by 1 week. We can count that my birthday was in between parshas. But last week, actually, in Parshat Kedoshim, there really is a famous line that I think I always kind of winked and nodded at, but now seems to take on a different kind of meaning to me. It comes from, as we're reading in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 32, and it says in Hebrew, "Mipnei seva takum vehadarta pnei zaken." You shall rise before the aged and shall show deference to the old. And the closing line of this, just for point of emphasis, Ve'areta Elohecha ani Adonai, fear your God, I am the Lord. So lest you think that this is a minor commandment, let's emphasize the fact that this is not so minor, at least according to God. But I've always sort of chuckled at this. We have a beloved member of our congregation who's not on the stream tonight, but Dr. Philip Lanskowski, and Dr. Lanskowski, owing to his youth growing up in South Africa and growing up in an Orthodox household, was taught that it's proper to stand up when the rabbi enters a room. So every time back when we had in the shul, I would walk into the room, and this man who was a world-renowned doctor would stand up for me, which just seemed ludicrous on every conceivable level. But he, in effect, right, forget his affection for me and his, all those personal things, he is responding in a way in which he was taught, which is that our tradition says that we should in fact rise, right? In his case, he's referring to a rising in the face of a rabbi. But the principal idea really here is to rise, as they say, before the aged and show deference to the old. So these texts, a lot of times, don't really give us an indication of how it is we're meant to do that. If we take it simply literally, it would mean every single time that somebody older than us walked in the room, we would need to stand up, which would lead to a certain amount of absurdity, and certainly not what I think that God intended or what this verse is really all about. So I want to unpack it a little bit and try to see if we can extract some additional meaning. So Rashi on this text, he points out something very important, right? He says, right, "Mipnei seva takum." One might think that this idea of having to stand before the aged would apply even in the case of someone who is not deserving of it, right? Somebody who, in his language, is a person of ignorance, right? Which is a sort of catch-all phrase in Judaism to refer to somebody who is a bore, who is displayed in their behavior no means to respect them other than this verse, which seems to imply that anybody of a certain age should be shown respect and deference. So Rashi here is coming along to imply that no, that's not really what's the case here. And he explains that the word zaken, which is the second part of the phrase, right? What's the more familiar term in Hebrew for someone who is older, zaken, zakena, which is actually the same word, believe it or not, for beard, which should have some implication there. Okay, but mipnei zaken, right? Or pnei zaken, in the face of a zaken, we are meant to show deference. And he explains that the word zaken is not just a question of counting time, okay? The zaken, he says, is actually an acronym, and we learned this from the Midrash, and it stands basically as an acronym for, and I'm forgetting exactly, of course, where it's not in front of me, exactly what it stands for, but it says in Hebrew, zaken ela shekana chokhmah, right? That a zaken is actually somebody, if you look at the letters, is somebody that basically has acquired wisdom in their life. It's not a question about their numerical age or how many times they have lived and the sun has rotated. That probably wouldn't have even been relevant for the rabbis of the Talmud, certainly, or of the Torah, right? Considering rotation of the earth. But simply not a question of time, but really a question of how much wisdom has the person accumulated in that time. Okay, so now I want to bring one other teaching, and forgive me for being repetitive 2 weeks in a row, but he just has been very relevant to me in the last few years. Sometimes the right people come along the right times. So the Orach Chaim Ibn Attar, who I taught last week, who was an 18th century rabbi from Morocco, 19th century rabbi from Morocco, to check on that. So he teaches this, and this is really a wonderful addition to it. So he says that in the Talmud, in Kiddushin 32, it explains that the word seva, the first of these two words that are used for someone who is older, right? That's the word that's translated as aged. The word seva refers to someone advanced in years, whereas the word zaken refers to someone who has acquired wisdom. Okay, so this is picking up from Rashi's ideas. The word takum means to rise as a sign of respect. Okay, the wording in the Talmud, though, is difficult, as in order to correspond to what the Talmud says, the Torah should really have written mipnei seva u'mipnei zaken takum vehadarta. Perhaps the Talmud intended to distinguish between different signs of recognition to be accorded to physical maturity, old age, and to spiritual maturity, which is Zekena. Okay, so he's drawing a distinction between physical old age and spiritual old age. In the former case, it suffices to rise from one's seat momentarily, right? In other words, if someone who walks in the door who is simply numerically older than you, then as a sign of respect to them, you can rise for a moment quickly and as a show of deference. But the idea of when you're standing in somebody who is a true Zekain or Zekena, somebody who has reached a spiritual maturity, these are the people to truly stand and show your deference to. Okay, these are the people that are really being described in the Torah portion right now. It's not just a matter of rising for someone who is older than you. There is a time and a purpose for that as well, right? That is an achievement in its own right. Okay, but the idea really behind this is to think about spiritual maturity and counting the years of our spiritual lives, not just our physical lives. And in that way, coming back to myself, right, I've thought about the sort of passage of years and realizing that certainly if I were to compare myself to 30-year-old Daniel, 20-year-old Daniel, 10-year-old Daniel, I should hope that my spiritual nature has matured some from those years. But I think it's also the realization that I am very far from a spiritual maturity, that I am still very far from the place in which I would be comfortable being acknowledged as I walked in the room, for example, for having reached a particular kind of age. And I hope, God willing, when I reach 50 or 60 or beyond, that in each of those opportunities for reflection, I will see a development of my spiritual growth. I hope, I can't guarantee, but I have an aspiration to reach that place. And while the passage of time is something that literally happens without our say-so, right, without having to do anything, not even if we could do anything, okay, it happens quite literally passively. Our spiritual advancement does not happen passively. Okay, it happens because of a sense of appreciation and gratitude and dedication and an opportunity, right, to develop that spiritual maturity. And I think that of all the gifts of deciding to become a rabbi and becoming a rabbi and getting lucky enough to end up with all of you, realizing what an accelerant that has been for my spiritual maturity and how much I appreciate, especially being able to celebrate this 40th year here, right, with all of you. Because I owe to each and every one of you and to the countless others who are not with us tonight for the development of that spiritual maturity, which I am still working on daily. And I hope that the experience of us learning together has helped you in that regard as well. And then I hope that for you, both in the experience of being the Zaken or Zakena, and also in the experience of recognizing Zakenim and Zakenot in your lives, right? The people around you who perhaps we maybe look past or look over, not realizing that in fact, not just in their physical years, but in their spiritual years, there is much wisdom to be imparted to each and every one of us. And so I think, again, Judaism has really deeply appreciated the aging, or as I think it's now being described in many cases, the saging process, right? The process of our development as human beings and the possibility of that development and the gift of that opportunity, that is so much a part of who we are, that a verse like this, which we sometimes chuckle at, is actually really deeply powerful and important. And it can't be just mixed up in a sort of rote behavior that just as soon as somebody walks in the room, that's all it's about, is sort of the reactionary nature of it. I think it's really much deeper than that. And so I don't think that you have to wait for your 40th birthday, or should it have already passed, for your next milestone birthday to contemplate these ideas. But maybe this is a good weekend to take stock of where you feel you are in that spiritual path, right? In that journey of your own development. And to acknowledge the ways in which you have strived and succeeded and changed and grown, and also very equally comfortably to acknowledge the places where you feel stuck, or the places in which the development has not continued at the pace that you had hoped for. And to try to ask the questions of how best to feed that part of your soul. And I hope very much that I and this community can be a part of that experience, but to know that it's oftentimes very deeply personal, as it's been for me this week. So with all of that said, I certainly, if it were possible these days to so easily do so, I would rise in deference to each and every one of you, certainly as my teachers and my friends. And I appreciate very much those of you that knew it was my birthday who wished me a happy birthday. Those that didn't know it was my birthday who's wishing it now. I really appreciate all of you and appreciate all of these years that I have been able to grow alongside you. So with that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. And at this point, I'll invite you to turn to page 570 as we count the Omer, continue our process of counting the Omer and counting our way towards a Shavuot. So again, we're on page 570. If you want to join me at the very beginning of the page, we begin with a short kavanah, an intention setter. Hineni muchan u'mezuman lekayem mitzvat aseh shel sfirat ha'omer. I am ready to fulfill the mitzvah of counting the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat ha'omer. We praise to you, Adonai, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to count the Omer. Hayom yom arba'a u'shloshim yom shehem arba'a shabuot v'shisha yamim la'omer. Today is 34 days, which is 4 weeks and 6 days of the Omer. And as we've finished counting, we'll now turn to page 586, Aleinu at the very bottom of the page. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon ha'kol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishpechot adama, shelo sam chelkinu kahem, Vegor aleinu kechol hamonaham, vanachnu korim umishtachabim umodim, nifte melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. We're now on page 591. V'nehemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz. Bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and of death. I'll now invite those who are in mourning and those observing Yahrzeit to rise in body or spirit. First, we remember in our community those who passed in recent months. Miles Ambrose, Morris Dickstein, Fred Eber, Edwin Friedman, Sandra Furman, Evelyn Gelb, Lucy Gladstone, Lois Herr, Phyllis Katz, Jeanette Kopp, Madge Judith Parcher, Steve Popkin, Danielle Lisa Rigg, Geraldine Rosen, Paul Silver, Virginia Tizer, Marjorie Weinberg Berman, and Ann Weiss. We also mark the Yahrzeits that occurred during the last week for Alex Abel, Milton Axelrod, Stuart Lawrence Bell, Melvin James Danis, Arthur Fagenbaum, William Grossman, Walter Gruenstein, Elias Kaplan, Hyman Cohns, Herman Morris, Randolph Scott Racklin, Irving Rubin, Esther Rusinoff, Elizabeth Schwab, Annie Schwartz, Herman Schwartz, Mo Slater, Samuel Slip, Ruth Stein, and Philip Zaslauer. If you have any additional names that you would like to add, you can certainly add them to the chat or hold your loved ones in your hearts. And while we certainly are thinking of all those who unfortunately were lost in Israel during this terrible incident in Har Meron, many of them have not yet been buried. Therefore, it's not appropriate yet to say Kaddish for them. By next week, we will certainly be considering them, but tonight we will hold them in our hearts as well. And I'll invite the mourners to join me on page 598 as we recite the mourners Kaddish together. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach kirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'b'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'b'zman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam le'almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. If you're still standing, you can be seated. And it's now my honor and privilege to invite my dear friend Gail Gambino up to our virtual bima. Gail, I'm going to add you and ask you to unmute. And Gail, who is a longtime board member, head of our caring program, and for many years the head of our Women's Rosh Chodesh group, and just all around wonderful person and excellent announcements reader, I might add, from experience. So Gail, let's just make sure we can hear you okay. Can we hear you okay?
Sure. Good evening and
Good.
yeah, good. Okay. Hi and good evening and Shabbat Shalom. I'm so happy to be with you again. Every time I do this, it brings me in my heart just a little closer to a time when we will really all be together, physically and spiritually. So I really look forward to that, as I know you do. But I'm happy that your presence is here with us this evening. Shabbat morning service will be live streamed tomorrow at 10 a.m. Join us on our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page. Archived versions will be available for viewing shortly after each service ends. Then join us for Torah study at 12 p.m. using a women's commentary. This week there will be a panel discussion on women and holiness in the book of Leviticus with moderator Ruth Joseph and panelists Judith Hollander, Emily Kutash, and Bradford Tepper. Niddah Mitzvah is on Monday at 11:30 a.m. Hebrew School is at 4 p.m. The Social Justice Committee will meet virtually at 5 p.m. and Musar practice will Zoom in at 7 p.m. I must tell you that when I read these each time, I am aware of how many really lovely and important and meaningful groups and endeavors that there are for you to connect with. So I really urge you to do that. You will also get a chance to have this repeated. So forgive me for interrupting, but I wanted you to know that I'm really encouraging you to taste some of the things that we're offering. They're really quite lovely. Rabbi Dan's class on Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel and the prophets is on Wednesday this week at 12 p.m. And the B'nai Mitzvah class will meet that day at 4 p.m. On Thursday, we begin our Veritable Mensches series with a film screening of Saul and Ruby's Holocaust Survivors Band. The documentary is about concentration camp survivors now living in South Florida who started a klezmer band to musically celebrate life and memorialize those who lost theirs in the Holocaust. Rabbi Dan's class, A Journey to the Heart of the Siddur, is on Friday at 9 a.m. On the following Monday, May 10th at 7 p.m., there will be a Social Justice Committee sponsored panel discussion on prosecuting hate, a conversation for the community, which includes members of the new Suffolk County Hate Crimes Task Force. Coming up in the Mensches series is a program about Bob Hope and World War II, and then a film about Universal Pictures founder Carl Laemmle, including a Q&A with the filmmaker. And on May 16th, we mark a very exciting moment in Temple Adas Israel's history, the beginning of our major building renovation, with a virtual groundbreaking that will be live streamed for all to witness. Catch it at 10:30 a.m. on our website. That's on May 16th. You can also catch it on our Facebook page or YouTube channel. No need to register. Please join us. Look for details, and this is important because I really did read a mouthful tonight. Look for details on these and all our programs and events in our weekly e-blasts and on our website calendar. If you're not getting our emails, please let the temple office know. We welcome you to join us after services tonight for a virtual Oneg Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom, lots of love and good health to everyone.
Shabbat Shalom, Gail, beautifully read. And you did have quite a lot to read tonight for sure. But as you said, there's a lot going on, and especially 16th After all these years, it's finally happening, people. It's finally happening. It's real. I know you've heard me say that so many times, it probably doesn't mean anything, but I'm telling you it's real. It's really happening. It's like the most amazing thing. Anyway, I'll geek out about it later. That's the greatest birthday present imaginable. Let me tell you that. Gail, thank you so much. Give Richard our love, and
I
we'll
will,
give you a
thank
little bit of a break. I love the orchids in the background. Lovely. Okay. Now, all right, Cantor Lauren, we got something to close us out with tonight before we do Kiddush?
Yes. Oh, say shalom livrona, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
Okay, we'll get our Kiddush cups together. If you have them, you join me on page 123. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava u'v'ratzon inchilanu zikaron lema'aseh bereshit. Ki hu yom techila lemikrahe kodesh zecher letziat Mitzrayim ki v'hanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol hamim ve'shabbat kodshecha ve'ahava u'ratzon inchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Amen. L'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim to life. And we'll wish all of our friends watching on the stream a Shabbat Shalom. Hope to see some of you tomorrow. Torah study with Women's Torah Commentary tomorrow is going to be amazing. Come. Even if you don't come to shul, come to that. It's going to be amazing. Please, please, please.